Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected. Saying that is true, something that is true every day of our lives, whether you like it or not. How you doing? Welcome. Early chatters are in. Sorry for my lateness. I apologize. I'm usually fairly punctual, so this is kind of a rarity to be even this late, unless it's technical issues. But hello, people. Pat Vollmer, hello from Oregon. Russ Taylor, Boiled Rope Lampposts. Boiled Rope Lampposts, anti-lockdown protests popping up. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. So remember, though, that the Yellow Vests protest started in response to a carbon tax, in response to taxes. Something people on the left might say were a good thing, or people concerned about climate change might say were good things. However, this is something that was just hitting people's pockets, right? Pocketbooks was making, I'm sure there are many people in France who are living on the edge, even though they have, more of a socially democratic country. People have healthcare, et cetera, but people are still living on the edge and having their safety nets, cut little by little, day by day, until you're just hanging on by your fingernails. And if that sounds familiar, you probably live in another, first world country like the U.S. Or anywhere in Europe, or anywhere else for that matter. But so the Yellow Vest protest was in response to, kind of a lefty, a lefty idea that they saw as an elite control scheme. And so, there's anti-lockdown protests popping up. And the crazy thing is that Trump is supporting these anti-lockdown protests. Liberate Michigan, liberate Ohio, etc., which is pretty wild. I mean, wild times when the president of the United States is urging the liberation of states against some kind of perceived federal control or federal, lockdown or overarching control scheme. It's wild indeed. Open Ohio now, is that what one of them? Yeah. So, yeah. And of course, I think the states he's targeting generally have Democratic governors or Democratic leadership in general. But, he set it up as a lefty-righty thing argument. I don't know. I don't know where this leads. I can actually see both sides. I understand that, anti-lockdown protests, in and of themselves are going against the idea that we need to stay quarantined and protect the public health and, not have mass death and mass sickness, of course. But there's a whole, there's the side of the argument that's very, very wary and very skeptical of, this lockdown scenario becoming, somewhat permanent, lockdown scenario implementing more control mechanisms, Um, you know what I'm saying? So under the guise of public safety, and isn't that always what happens? We want to make people feel safe, or people want safety. They want to know that they're being protected, and so there are people that are very, very worried about the lockdown scenario, and just on the short term. In the short term, people's livelihoods are being impinged upon. I mean, people are losing their businesses, they're losing their income, they're losing their jobs. There are people lining up for food. Um, in many cities and many states, and what happens when people start getting hungry or start losing their homes? It doesn't really matter what side of the aisle you on. It doesn't matter whether you're a Trumper or a lefty. If you're hungry and you're starving and or homeless, you're going to be pissed. And you might be like, fuck this lockdown. I actually just saw a progressive friend of mine. So, somebody who's they're not a Trumper. They're more on the progressive lefty side, but posted something on Facebook about, end the lockdowns. So I don't know. I don't know where this goes. Keith Hayes says public safety is the number one concern. There should be no argument about this. Well, there should be no argument. You would think there would be no argument. However, if people are hungry and or going homeless, it's really kind of hard to understand. Like, this is, how is this helping me? Right? It becomes very confused and muddied. Excuse me. Noel Wilson, a people that will sacrifice freedom for their safety deserve neither and will lose both. Very prescient quote from Benjamin Franklin. Kiro hikes. Every day I become more and more skeptical. And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? With so many conflicting stories about, where this actually came from or what's actually going on. What's how bad or how severe is it, or how I'm not saying that you should endanger yourself or endanger people. If you have questions, you should absolutely take your health and other people's health very seriously and protect yourself. I'm just saying people have a lot of questions, and they rightly have questions. They shouldn't be, they should have their fear and their anger and their panic and their hunger and their possible lack of housing and lack of health care. They should have all of those things addressed, all those questions addressed. And then people that have concern about, government overreach or possible lockdown scenarios creating, more control scenarios. I think all those questions are legitimate. I think people should have those questions and those fears alleviated, or at least addressed on some level. Rich Diana says limits to growth is starting to show its dark side. Marie Telez says, but the new norm is going to be working with masks and gloves. This is a pandemic and is seriously ugly. Slap Happy 813 says, when imposing fines for walking your dog or being out past 9 p.m., yes, that's not right, especially when people aren't working. Well, yeah, and there you go. I mean, I don't, if you're just out, partying or whatever, having a good time, I don't know if there's, I don't know about that, but if you're, if you're just out and about, I mean, I think people being fined or being possibly incarcerated for defying orders, can be a little bit over the top. Um, yeah, and Scott Andrews, right wingers know how to protest while progressives just have discussions. Point taken. And you're onto something there. Although I've seen, seen plenty of left protests. Um, I think plenty of people know how to protest. But progressives tend to do it, on a nice sunny Saturday. They're not impinging on anybody or not worrying the authorities. So the other day, I know I made some some comments about compassion being a feature of the left or whatever, and I realized that was it was a huge generalization about the left and the right. Obviously, people on the right can have compassion, whatever the right is. I'm not really even sure what left or right is anymore, because I think, and you know, most studies have shown, most of the data shows that people are, like all people are a mix of some liberal and some conservative ideas. So even though people identify as conservative or liberal, many people have, multiple viewpoints inside themselves even. There are a lot of people on the left who consider themselves left, but they're not left on everything. They're conservative on some issues. And the same goes with conservatives. So I was just generalizing, probably not rightly generalizing about the idea that I think for the most part, though, in recent history, more progressive ideas have been associated with people on the left. However, there are many cases where conservative people bring about very, very progressive ideas. As soon as you start putting somebody in a box, I think it's a problem. And I use the boxes of left or right the other day, just in a very broad, sweeping kind of way. But I realize though that there are, again, people exist on a spectrum. The spectrum is very wide, and people can actually exist on multiple points of the spectrum at any given time. Exactly. Slap happy 813. Pelosi is just a mountain of compassion. Well, and so the other thing, here's the thing that the left are very good at, is using the cover of compassion or progressivism to do really harmful, shitty things, right? Like it has been shown in recent history by many people that we would consider leaders of the left, that they do terrible, terrible things. Sometimes even really horrible, just insanely horrible things under the guise of being a Democrat or being a lefty or being a liberal. They use that as a cover, right? Their public face or their, out-facing persona, front-facing persona is one of, compassion and kindness and caring and, lofty ideals and progressive, wishes for the masses, but what they're actually doing in their private lives or behind closed doors or, out of sight of prying eyes are actually like really terrible things. And even in the case of Proudhon, what was that? People hate you for saying that, Kevin? For saying what? Exactly. I bet the elite aren't doing social distancing at their eyes wide shut parties. What exactly are they hating me for saying, Prudhomme? I don't know. Um, the dude says the fake left. Indeed. Cornholio, the media makes people think in boxes. Indeed. You guys are on it today. And so, yeah, the media makes people think in boxes, and I think that's why people. So the media puts out certain information, and then I see people on social media. This happens all the time. I see people on social media take in the information that they're getting from the mainstream media and like go full outrage on it, right? So of course, all these anti-lockdown protests are happening, and everybody who's on the left in media, or everybody who's on the left on my social media page are like, these motherfuckers. Not necessarily stopping to reflect on the fact that people are going hungry. Just give me 1 second. Let me. I mean, the images are everywhere. Yeah, here we go. This is actually what I was going to show you. Um, Sorry guys, I'm getting a lot of like copyright strike issues, so I'm having to figure out, because I'm showing you somebody. Marie Telez, thank you so much for the whoops. What happened here? Thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate you. Um, you gave me a drink of tired, or is tired on my coffee cup? Is that what that's saying? I don't know. But thank you. Um, Before I get off on too many tangents, uh, yeah, I've been getting a couple of copyright strikes lately, just because I'm trying to figure out. I've been showing you guys stuff on my screen, and that's creating problems. Oh, here we go. Anyways, maybe y'all can see this. This is people lining up for food in Maryland, and this is a crazy long line. People in the United States struggling to make ends meet after being deprived of paychecks due to coronavirus stay-at-home orders have been lining up by the thousands to pick up free groceries from food, banks, and charities. So this is uh, this is crazy, because our leaders have not responded quickly enough to this crisis, because our leaders have not, you know, fully put the weight of the financial power of the government behind helping people out in this crisis, right? Oh, here's this crisis. We're gonna, tell everybody to stay at home, and we're gonna send you, $1,200 or less, but we don't know when those checks are gonna go out. Meanwhile, apply for unemployment. Meanwhile, it's been a month since you had a paycheck. Um, I don't care whether you're on the left or the right. I'm sure a lot of people are like, F this stay-at-home order, or, F this lockdown, or F this quarantine, or F this whole situation, because, I'm going hungry. I've got to line up to get food now. Um, so if you're on social media, talking about what assholes these people are for having an anti-lockdown protest, perhaps, try and understand that a lot of people are hurting. And maybe these people aren't right or left. Maybe they're just like, this whole thing stinks to me. And now we're hungry, and now I'm about to lose my house because I can't pay rent for the second month in a row. Kuro Hike says, how come no no elites died? Good question. Good question. Prudhomme says they hate you for saying they're not compassionate. Right. Right. Well, and once lefties are in power, or once lefties are part of the power base, then it doesn't matter, then whatever needs to be done to stay in power, or whatever lies need to be told, or whatever deals need to be cut, whatever Trump policies you need to sign off on in order to stay in power, whatever money needs to be taken, whatever you need to do to stay in power, becomes more important than actually having compassion or doing compassionate things for the people. And that's why we're in this problem. That's why we're in this situation that we are in now. Because, the Democrats, the supposed left, have moved so far right that we basically right-wing parties who, throw crumbs at people and say lots of nice, pretty words, right? Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden and all these people just have really lots of nice things to say. About the great things they're going to do for people, but people are lining up to get food. People cannot pay their rents. So where is this left? Where is all this compassion? And Nancy Pelosi has $14 quarts of ice cream in her fancy fridge. I'm sure she does. Kuro Hike says, I never got my Corona check. A lot of people haven't gotten their check. A lot of people haven't got their, have tried to apply for unemployment. I know that the unemployment website in California is almost impossible to get on. I've been seeing people complain about it almost daily. I can't get onto the site. So they applied for unemployment or tried to apply for unemployment, and, you just can't get through to anybody, to talk to anybody, or get on the website. So how many people have applied for unemployment now? Something in the 20 million range? That's wild. It is wild. $22 million Americans have filed for unemployment benefits in the last 4 weeks. This ridiculous headline from the Washington Post. U.S. now has 22 million unemployed, wiping out a decade of jobs gains. Okay. Oh, that decade of jobs gains that we wiped out. What the heck is going on with my... Why do I keep showing this graph on my screen? Well, besides the fact that I keep hitting the wrong button. Let's see if it goes away. Kuro Hike says, what better response for being accused of not being compassionate is hate? Right. A truly compassionate society, if we had a truly compassionate leaders or a truly compassionate government, the thing that Bernie Sanders has been talking about for decades and continues to talk about, how we should, be doing these things, doing these great things for people, how we should, not be letting people fall through the cracks, how we should, not be escalating the the prison population. We should, right? We should be doing all these things. We should not be having the problems that we're having. Jesse Daly, I got my money on the 15th. That's good. I actually got a check myself. Scott Andrews, I read that Jared Kushner is still evicting tenants during the pandemic. Well, it sounds about right. Right. Russ Taylor, we should be doing all these things. We should be taking care of these problems, but we just can't do it because Marie Tellez, I have not gotten my stimulus check at all. Yeah, a lot of people are falling through the cracks. So Rich Diana says the lesson of the pandemic should be that it is time to lower our ecological footprint upon our mother. No real discussion is taking place on that subject. Well, no, you're right. And the whole idea of an emergency, we're in an emergency situation, makes it impossible to have that discussion because, oh my God, how could you bring this up? People are starving. People are, missing their rent payments. People are sick and dying. We don't have medical care for people. So how can we talk about climate change? Sorry for the laxing in my stream. My stream seems to be struggling right now. I don't know why. Or maybe I do know why. Yeah, I'm with you, Russ. Give me 1 second, guys. Shit. Ah. All right, I got my stream back. Sorry, guys. Sorry for the... It's choking, but now it's back. I apologize for the lag. Ecocentric Homestead says, how can we talk about climate change? That's easy. The sick and dying are not the ones that would be helped by dropping climate change issues. Somebody cut my head off. Yes. Right. All right. The dog did it. I don't know. I don't know how we're going to continue to put climate change as a forefront topic in people's minds in the middle of this. I really don't know. I think that linking um, linking what we're doing as partly a solution, right? Like, so coronavirus is really terrible and scary and ugly, and look what we're doing in the face of it. Um, I don't, trying to tell people that, like, look, climate change is 20 times uglier than coronavirus and permanent and most likely deadly to the point of extinction. If you can get that point across to people and say, like, look at what we're doing in the face of this virus. Surely we could do half as much, if not the same, in the face of climate change. Climate change will slam us, indeed. Lex Green, it does show that a world movement can be achieved. Indeed. This idea that we can't come together and do something like this is absolutely ridiculous. So, the idea that we can't coalesce, converge, cooperate on a global scale, the idea that we can't do this is ridiculous. We're showing right now that we can. Of course, to bring back the people, bring back the anti-lockdown protest movement, and even the Yellow Vests, right? You have to actually convince people that this is a real thing that's going on, and that it's not a globalist agenda, that it's not a money grab for the elite or a power grab for the elite. It absolutely has to be a bottom-up agenda. It has to be a grassroots movement. If you can convince people as a climate change protest to stay at home, millions of people, I'm going to stay at home. I'm not driving to work. I'm not going out to work. I'm not going on a vacation. I'm not driving my car all over the country. It has to be something that's bottom up, that's organized from a people level. It can't be organized from a government level, because you'll always have people saying this is a conspiracy. This is an agenda. This is an elite agenda, right? But what we have as a model, though. Gene says no tinfoil hat wearers in this chat. Are you? Is that a threat, or is that just a statement of fact or non-fact? I don't know. Prudhomme says if you had BBC, CNN, Fox, etc. warning of imminent doom every 30 seconds, people might take climate change more seriously. Well, they might. They might at that. Noel Wilson, denial of folks' basic rights is a terrible way to convince them of anything, sure. But wait a minute. But, so that, again, that goes back to the question of humanism or human rights, or what rights do we have? What rights should we have? I mean, we think we have rights. We think that we have the right to do whatever we want because we're humanists, aka human supremacists. We think that we're more important than everybody else, right? I mean, we're more important than nature. We're more important than the environment. We're more important than the biosphere. So do we actually, what right do we have? If we're going to convince people that some kind of movement has to happen, or non-movement, as it were, if we're trying to organize some kind of stay-at-home for climate change movement, or if we're trying to organize people in a way to, enough people to take themselves out of the system that we partially collapse the system, the way this pandemic is collapsing the system, you'd have to convince them that, they would have to understand that this is in the best interest of humans and in the best interest of the biosphere. Deb Van Poelen says, I don't know if I would say our rights are being denied. True. We aren't more important than nature. Let's mimic nature and work cooperatively. I mean, yeah, so look, you have the right not to engage in this, right? It's kind of, you could actually make the argument that you have the right not to engage in the system, or you have the right not to get a job or go to school or make money, or, you have the right to do all those things. But, if you exercise that right to not be a member of society, or not work or have a job or do whatever it is that you're supposed to do in order to provide for yourself, right? Where do you end up? You end up having none of those things, right? So, so flip that. Human beings, have the right to do whatever they want. They have the freedom, we have the right to be free. We're free. Are we really free? How much freedom do we really have? You have to obey laws in order to not go to jail. You have to do certain things to exercise your freedoms. Exactly. Deb Van Poelen, we decide as a society what are our rights. But you have to do certain things in order to exercise your rights or have your supposed freedom. Are you free to collect rainwater? Are you free to live off grid? Are you free to, to not be a part of society? In some places, in many states, you're not free to do those things. You're not free to live off the land. You're not free to not be connected to the grid. You're not free to, not have a vaccine if you want to go to school, or if you want to be, in some places. So, yes, all of it is actually arbitrary. Our rights, our freedoms, what we're free to do, what is it? Somebody had a good point the other day about, we all agree to stop at stop signs. We all agree to follow the rules of the road when we're driving. And nobody's saying you're impinging on my right, my freedoms, because I can't stop at the stop sign, because I have to stop at this stop sign or stop at this green light. We agree to these rules in order to make society work better, or in order to not have, chaos. So it's all friggin' arbitrary. You actually have to condition people to accept certain rules because they understand that this is what makes society work. Right? So, do we have a right to impinge humanity on the biosphere? Well, we're going to find out, if we insist on having the right to impinge on the biosphere, which we are doing at the moment, we're going to find out that we don't have the right to do that. But we're going to find out at a very great cost. Okay, so we've had a really good discussion today, guys. I want to cover something before we go, because I really wanted to get into something. Because we've been talking about, we've been kind of around the edges of talking about Epstein, and a little bit about Pizzagate, and a little bit about, what's going on with the elites. I think that all of you guys are incredibly knowledgeable people, and you're already pretty up on the idea that, the elites are engaged in some terrible things. But, it's really hard to talk about this subject because it's not just that it's not just the fact that the mainstream media and the people that control the media and control the country don't want you to talk about this. It's not just that. It's just that people in general don't want to bring this up, don't really, don't want to engage in discussions about this because it's not, it's not polite, or it's not acceptable, or it's too harsh. It's just not something that people really want to deal with on the same level as the sixth mass extinction, right? So, you talk about, oh, climate change is real, and people are like, oh yeah, sure, climate change, yeah, big deal. But if you say, well, we could be extinct really soon, that's when they kind of end the. That's when they kind of end of the discussion, or they're like, yeah, okay. Well, I don't want to get too bummed out, so let's not think about it, or let's not deal with it. Let's not. Kind of on the level of, when Extinction Rebellion brings the idea of escalating climate change or climate collapse scenario into the public sphere, there's a huge backlash. There, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't, do I really think this is that big of a deal? Well, okay, I think it's a problem, but it's not more of a problem than people going to work, or people working their jobs, or people just living their lives. Please don't impinge on me just living my life. And so again, that's why this is an issue that is very hard to bring up, because there is a bit of a, respectability politic attitude in this, where you may or may not know that it's a problem, you may or may not concede, but I think it's even more so on the left than on the right. It's a very difficult thing to bring up, because people are like, oh my God, do you think that, we're being controlled by pedophiles, or there's this huge pedophile ring, or the Clintons are involved in, all this stuff, Pizzagate, oh my God, you're a crazy person for talking about this. It's a very real thing, and if you actually understood that it's a real thing, and if you were concerned that it's a real thing, why wouldn't you want this stuff to be investigated? Why wouldn't you want the full force of the law and the organizations that are supposed to enforce the law? Why wouldn't you want the full force of the law brought to bear on these kinds of actions? I don't know. Scott Murdo, what are you saying? Why do I have the feeling Kay is about to go all what? What is WWG? What is this? I don't know what that means. Where we go one, we go all. Yeah, Scott Murdo, whatever, dude. Okay, where we go one, we go all. You all know who Cynthia McKinney is? Cynthia McKinney is a Democrat. She was a Democrat representative in Congress during the Bush administration, and she brought up certain things to light. And she was actually beaten in her district twice. She served as a Democrat. She was beaten in her district in 2002 after questioning some of the events that were going on around 9/11. And then she won. She regained her seat in 2004, and then she was beaten in 2006. So they really, really did not like her being in Congress, because she was asking questions and bringing things up like this. She's not a Republican. She's not a right winger. She is a Democrat.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, I watched President Bush deliver a moving speech at the United Nations in September 2003. in which he mentioned the crisis of the sex trade. The president called for the punishment of those involved in this horrible business. But at the very moment of that speech, DynCorp was exposed for having been involved in the buying and selling of young women and children. While all of this was going on, DynCorp kept the Pentagon contract to administer the smallpox and anthrax vaccines and is now working on a plague vaccine through the Joint Vaccine Acquisition Program.
I'm going to stop right there. Hold on. She brought up a lot of stuff in the space of like 1 minute. A lot of stuff in the space of a minute. She brought up DynCorp involved in trafficking, human trafficking. And then she brought up the idea, she brought up the fact, not an idea. She's not a conspiracy theorist. She's sitting in Congress. She's testifying in Congress that DynCorp has a contract, a vaccine contract, a smallpox vaccine contract, and that they have a contract to develop a quote unquote plague vaccine. So this is a Democrat. Right, Proudhon, she wouldn't sign a loyalty oath to Israel. Also, yeah, she was called an anti-Semite. She, all the things that people say about people that don't, toe the party line. This is a Democrat. So if you think this is not, this is something she testified to in Congress. This was brought out. This was an actual case. The DynCorp was found to be involved in human trafficking, and they were still awarded contracts by the government. And she was run out of office, with quick haste. What they did was they got a bunch of, I think in the first time she lost her race, there were a bunch of Republicans. What they did was get a bunch of Republicans to cross over and vote for her rival in her first race, and then they gerrymandered her district the second time around. They redrew the lines of her district, and they just, who the hell is DynCorp? DynCorp is a government, is a contractor, and they provide services for the government, like logistical services. Right. So the other thing that she brought up that's very interesting is that somebody was saying that vaccines are all for free and they're just for the good of human beings. And they're really dirt cheap. Why would a huge company like DynCorp, a logistical company, have a contract with the U.S. government for supplying vaccines? Why would there be a contract? They were being paid money to administer vaccines. And they also had a contract to develop a quote unquote plague vaccine. So, if you think that this is some kind of like right-wing thing, or you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. And again, this is, an information game that's being run on people by, again, the mainstream media. Doesn't want you to think about these things, doesn't want you to know about these things. We want to all be really nice and kind and polite and compassionate to each other. Let's not bring this stuff up because it's very mean to bring up these things. It's mean to the victims, or it's just really not a nice thing to talk about. Oh my God. How dare you? How dare you talk about these things? This sounds like some kind of wacky conspiracy theory. No, this is a testimony in Congress from Cynthia McKinney. So if you did not know that, no representation. What am I talking about? I'm talking about people that don't understand, that think that things that are not, going on are you know, what I'm saying is, if you think these things are not going on because they're just a conspiracy theory or just somebody made this up, you're highly delusional. If you think that there isn't some kind of control mechanism being, put in place by the people that organize the government and organize these things, such as, these really nice, things that help people called vaccines. I would just suggest that you open your mind a little bit and question what the story is. So, Keith Hayes, first one will print "fuck Trump" across your face. Yeah. This isn't the time to talk about fill in the blank. Exactly. Poppy Davis. Exactly. Anyways, to get back to what I was trying to say. So, we've touched very briefly on this. Every once in a while, Gene, are you talking about biological warfare? Well, biological, propaganda warfare. There's good evidence that when people get into positions of power, that they are compromised, et cetera, and everybody's part of, some kind of, sexually deviant societies. You have to have some kind of power. And, if you do that, if you question, then you lose your seat in Congress. Or, how about this? Yeah, no representation. Yeah, continue to, whatever.
Well, my name is Nancy
Continue
Schaefer,
to believe that everything is just fine. And this
I'm
is
from
for
the
all
state of
for...
Georgia in the United States.
Hold on.
And
Hold on. This woman...
some legislation passed of all Child Protective Services Department.
Hold on. I'm queuing it up.
Or bonuses.
So I'm not gonna play this right now. I'm just gonna show you this woman's face. This is Nancy Schaefer. She's a Republican from Georgia as well, but she was exposing the fact that Child Protective Services had basically were getting bonuses for child adoption. So they were taking kids from families under dubious means, and that they were trying to get basically their adoption numbers up, and they were getting bonuses for these numbers. That there's a huge amount of money involved in Child Protective Services and people getting kids away from parents and getting them placed in other homes, et cetera, et cetera. This woman died in
Child is placed in a foster.
This woman died in a murder-suicide in 2010. Quote unquote murder-suicide. Supposedly, her husband shot her and then shot himself. There you go. Yeah, Cynthia McKinney is a solid. So Nancy Schaefer was also involved in uncovering this. She was basically uncovering the fact that Child Protective Services as an organization was like basically putting kids in homes with pedophiles. They were getting kids placed with people that were very questionable, et cetera, et cetera. This is, something that she was documenting, and then she this upstanding member of their community suddenly was murdered in 2010. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is I'm just getting you to think about some weird things. Because we talk about it every once in a while, just on the periphery. But if you think that, I'd like to talk about this more in depth, but if you think that this is a partisan issue, if you think that this is, something that is a conspiracy theory, if you think that this is something that, couldn't possibly be going on because why would anybody do that? That's actually not true. So just wanted to end on a very strange note. No, Gene, no one here thinks the world is flat. That's a ridiculous theory. It's a ridiculous theory. Just wanted to make Doomerville a little bit weirder today. That's all. And I like talking about Cynthia McKinney because she is she's a great human being. And she dared to question. If I'll link I'll put a link to that video in the description box, but watch that whole video. She really she covers a lot of ground in that video. That there is, misappropriation of funds in the DOD, and they're still giving DynCorp. They're hiring this company that's involved in child trafficking, et cetera, et cetera. It's just it's wildness. Kevin, get a whiteboard and map out. Gene, then you'll listen. Is a pizza pie in the eye really a more or not? The truth is out there. Exactly. Make BBN weird again. Exactly. Well, if it's not weird enough, I don't know what to tell you. Well, Gene, the thing is, so I'm going to go back to this comment. Get a whiteboard and map out the evidence, then I'll listen. The evidence I just presented you was a congresswoman bringing up evidence in a congressional hearing. That, this stuff was not stuff she made up. This was all documented. Right. Right. The dude says human trafficking is real and the deep dark swamp goes all the way down. Oh, all the way to the top. And Epstein was a CIA asset. Well, there you go. Thanks. I am Sweet Leaf. Yeah, well, I'm going to circle around back to this in coming days. But this is for me, this is a serious issue. This is an incredibly serious issue. I don't know what to do about it. I would, if people understood that this was going on, or people were really upset that this was going on, if they actually had an idea that this was actually going on, what would you do about it? That's what I ask. Anthony Davis, Texas is a hot zone now. Deaths on the rise, not going down anytime soon. Seems like nobody wears a mask nor cares. Or, well, maybe Trump can sleep at night, but I can't. I didn't know that. Nobody wears a mask in Texas? Well, aren't they lifting the lockdown provisions? Or didn't they already do that? Anyways, guys, it's been a weird one. We were just kind of all over the place talking about stuff. Yes, Gene, I seem like a good person. I am a good person. I try. The dude says, and also getting the right-winger dipshits to think it's all about Tom Hanks and whatever celebrities because they're all Satan worshipers and baby eaters is mighty handy for the Rothschilds and other various actual baby eaters. Well, the thing is that the document, there's documented truth that doesn't have to be conflated with all of that rhetoric, right? So, there you go. I just gave you some documented truth. So I gave you a testimony of Cynthia McKinney in Congress around DynCorp. Nancy Schaefer, just Google her name. Understand that she was about to, release a bunch of information about Child Protective Services and the things that they were doing and the fact that, the government contracts around this look very inappropriate. And she ended up dying very soon after that. So, I don't know what that tells you. Draw your own conclusions. I love Cynthia McKinney too. And she's still out there. You know what? Maybe I can get an interview with Cynthia McKinney because she's actually totally down to talk to people on the internets. So maybe I'll try. All right, guys. Thanks. I have run out of time. I appreciate you. I'll be back tomorrow at the same bat time. Thank you for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. Until next time, peace.